to the Daily Bite. I'm your host, Pastor Steve Andrews.
We continue in 2 Chronicles with chapter 18. Now Jehoshaphat had great riches and honor, and he made a marriage alliance with Ahab. After some years he went down to Ahab in Samaria, and Ahab killed an abundance of sheep and oxen for him, and for the people who were with him, and induced him to go up against Ramoth-Gilead. Ahab, king of Israel, said to Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, "Will you go with me to Ramoth-Gilead?" He answered him, "I am as you are, my people as your people. We will be with you in the war." And Jehoshaphat said to the king of Israel, "Inquire first for the word of Yahweh." Then the king of Israel gathered the prophets together, 400 men, and said to them, "Shall we go to battle against Ramoth-Gilead, or shall I refrain?" And they said, "Go up, for God will give it into the hand of the king." But Jehoshaphat said, "Is there not here another prophet of Yahweh of whom we may inquire?" And the king of Israel said to Jehoshaphat, "There is yet one man by whom we may inquire of Yahweh, Micaiah the son of Imlah. But I hate him, for he never prophesies good concerning me, but always evil." And Jehoshaphat said, "Let not the king say so." Then the king of Israel summoned an officer and said, "Bring quickly Micaiah the son of Imlah." Now the king of Israel and Jehoshaphat the king of Judah were sitting on their thrones, arrayed in their robes, and they were sitting at the threshing floor at the entrance of the gate of Samaria, and all the prophets were prophesying before them. And Zedekiah the son of Kenana made for himself horns of iron, and said, "Thus says Yahweh, with these you shall push the Syrians until they are destroyed." And all the prophets prophesied so, and said, "Go up to Ramoth-Gilead in triumph. Yahweh will give it into the hand of the king." And the messenger who went to summon Micaiah said to him, "Behold, the words of the prophets with one accord are favorable to the king. Let your word be like the word of one of them, and speak favorably." But Micaiah said, "As Yahweh lives, what my God says, that I will speak." And when he had come to the king said to him, "Micaiah, shall we go to Ramoth-Gilead to battle, or shall I refrain?" And he answered, "Go up in triumph. They will be given into your hand." But the king said to him, "How many times shall I make you swear that you speak to me nothing but the truth in the name of Yahweh?" And he said, "I saw Israel scattered on the mountains, as sheep that have no shepherd. And Yahweh said, These have no master. Let each return to his home in peace." And the king of Israel said to Jehoshaphat, "Did I not tell you that he would not prophesy good concerning me, but evil?" And Micaiah said, "Therefore hear the word of Yahweh. I saw Yahweh sitting on his throne, and all the host of heaven standing on his right hand and on his left. And Yahweh said, Who will entice Ahab the king of Israel, that he may go up and fall at Ramoth-Gilead?" And one said one thing, another said another. Then a spirit came forward and stood before Yahweh, saying, "I will entice him." And Yahweh said to him, "By what means?" And he said, "I will go out, and will be a lying spirit in the mouth of all his prophets." And he said, "You are to entice him, and you shall succeed. Go out and do so. Now therefore, behold, Yahweh has put a lying spirit in the mouth of these your prophets. Yahweh has declared disaster concerning you." Then Zedekiah the son of Kenana came near and struck Micaiah on the cheek, and said, "Which way did the Spirit of Yahweh go for me to speak to you?" Micaiah said, "Behold, you shall see on that day, when you go into an inner chamber to hide yourself." And the king of Israel said, "Seize Micaiah, and take him back to Ammon the governor of the city, and to Joash the king's son. And say, Thus says the king, Put this fellow in prison, and feed him with meager rations of bread and water until I return in peace." And Micaiah said, "If you return in peace, Yahweh has not spoken by me." And he said, "Hear, all you peoples. This is the word of the Lord." So our text today is the second chapter that we have on King Jehoshaphat of Judah, second out of 4. And it's the weak point for him, really, in the text. So he's already got great riches and honor, and now he makes a marriage alliance with Ahab, king of Israel, the northern kingdom. This is a clarifying kind of a question for your children, but just check on this phrase, marriage alliance. Ask them what it means. They might not recognize a phrase like that because we really don't do that as a people anymore. So a marriage alliance would be that Jehoshaphat is going to marry a daughter of another kingdom to form an alliance between the two kingdoms. That as he has married the princess of another nation, their two peoples are now like one. That's the goal. It's something King Solomon, how many generations is that? Solomon, Rehoboam, Abijah, Asa, now Jehoshaphat. So his great-great-grandfather had a lot of marriage alliances, many of them. So he has gone for a marriage alliance with Ahab, and after some years, we're not told how long this is into his reign, he goes down to Ahab in Samaria, which is Ahab's capital, the city of Samaria, capital of the northern kingdom of Israel. Ahab throws a great feast for him and invites him to go to war with him against Ramoth Gilead, which is really, it's part of the northern kingdom. It is part of the land that was allotted to the people of God on the eastern side of the Jordan River, when Reuben, Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh chose to dwell on the eastern side of the Jordan, probably 20, 25 miles east of the Jordan River, or so north of the Jabbok River would be where you'd find it. The point here that we get throughout the text is basically that the Syrians have taken it. So the northern enemy that they are, they've come pressing down against Israel. They've taken over one of Israel's cities, and Ahab wants to go take it back. That makes sense. That's fair enough. And so he invites Jehoshaphat to go and fight with him. And Jehoshaphat's answer in verse 3, I am as you are, my people as your people. We will be with you in the war. Ask your children what's wrong with this. What's wrong with this answer from King Jehoshaphat of Judah? This is the problem, really, with the marriage alliance in the first place. The marriage alliance did what the king said. I am as you are, my people as your people. That's what the marriage alliance's purpose is to make them one people. But they're not. Because if you say, I am as you are, my people as your people, what else are you agreeing to? The Israelites do not worship Yahweh. They worship a whole slew of false gods. So to say, I am as you are, my people as your people, is to say that you also worship all those false gods. This is, by the way, one of the aspects behind closed communion in the church today, that we don't just go commune at another altar, because we are then confessing that we believe what those people believe. We are saying, I am as you are, when we're not. Or when they're not like us, even though they've come into our church and demand to be able to receive the holy thing of God. It's one of the reasons. There are multiple, but that's one of them. So Jehoshaphat finally does actually have a moment of wisdom here and says, inquire first the word of Yahweh. That's good. Really, he should have said that before he said what he said in verse 3. This should have been his starting point. Inquire of Yahweh. And so Ahab does. He gathers together 400 prophets and asks them if he should go and fight Ramoth Gilead or not. And the prophets, together with one voice, say, go. God will give it into the hand of the king. Something seems off. However, and Jehoshaphat, verse 6, recognizes this, says, is there not another prophet? We have 400 yeses, what do you need another one for? Jehoshaphat must have realized something was wrong with the way these prophets were speaking. And so he asks if there's yet another, to which Ahab says there is, Micaiah, but I hate him. For he never prophesies good concerning me, but always evil. So there are 400 prophets, lying prophets, who say whatever the king wants to hear, and there's one who says whatever the king doesn't want to hear. And which group of prophets does he call to himself when he seeks an answer? Well, he calls the ones that are going to tell him what he wants to hear. This is 2 Timothy 4:3. For the time is coming when people will not endure sound teaching, but having itching ears, they will accumulate for themselves teachers to suit their own passions. That's Paul's warning to the young pastor Timothy, and it is the same case here in the Old Testament. It is definitely true at this point today. This happens all around us, that people would rather have their ears itch. They'd rather have somebody tell them stuff that they want to hear rather than tell them the actual word of God. So King Ahab has identified that Micaiah never prophesies good concerning him, but always evil, to which Jehoshaphat responds, "Let not the king say so." Not exactly 100% sure what Jehoshaphat's response is a reference to. Is it to the idea from Ahab that a prophet would possibly oppose the king of Israel? Or is it perhaps from the idea that Ahab said, "I hate him"? May the king not say he hates the prophet of God. I don't know for sure. A couple of options there. So the king has one of his officers go to retrieve Micaiah. In the meantime, we get the notes about where the situation is, what the setting is like, that both Ahab and Jehoshaphat are on their royal thrones. They have been brought to the gate of Samaria, to the threshing floor outside of the city wall, where they would thresh wheat, so you separate wheat from chaff. And the prophets are there prophesying before them. So they've got the 400 of them doing their thing. And one of them, Zedekiah, makes a set of horns out of iron, which is impressive. And he uses them as part of his prophecy. Basically, with these horns, you will drive out the Syrians. So the idea of, I guess, like a bucking animal pushing against an enemy, fighting against. Yahweh will give it into your hand, is the message from all of the prophets together again. So this official, this messenger, makes it to Micaiah, and he points out to him that all of the prophets are speaking favorably to the king, so Micaiah should come, and Micaiah should do the same thing. Micaiah's response is right and good for a prophet. As Yahweh lives, what my God says, that I will speak. This is what a prophet is given to do, not whatever he wants to say, but what God gives him to say. And yet when he comes, verse 14, the king asks his question, "Micaiah, shall we go or shall I refrain?" He answers, "Go up in triumph, they will be given into your hand." He answers in unison with the 400. And just as Jehoshaphat noticed in verse 6 that something was amiss, Ahab notices it here. He recognizes that Micaiah is not speaking truly to him. So this is not good on Micaiah's part, by the way, to not speak the truth when he has been asked for God's word. He is not given it. And the king points it out. "How many times shall I make you swear that you speak to me nothing but the truth in the name of Yahweh?" I mean, indeed, how many? How many times has Micaiah done this? I mean, almost imagine Micaiah speaking here with a sarcastic tone or something, so that the king's picking up on this so obviously. But he's made a habit of this, that the king has to press him to speak the truth of God to him. And so he presses him, and Micaiah then speaks the truth. Now, what Micaiah responds is in two parts. The first part is essentially the vision from the Lord that he sees Israel scattered on a mountain without a shepherd. The shepherd would be the king. The king's been killed is the picture here. That if you go, you're going to die. And Israel will have no leader anymore, so God will simply disperse them, send them home. That's the response. And so that's what Ahab then responds to in verse 17 as he speaks to Jehoshaphat. "Did I not tell you that he would not prophesy good concerning me, but evil?" And Micaiah at that point continues onward and shares what has actually happened in the heavenly council. That Yahweh sitting on his throne is surrounded by the hosts of heaven, which in this case I think is going to include both angels and demons. We do know that the demons are eventually cast out from heaven. They eventually leave the heavenly council of God. But for example, in the book of Job, chapters 1 and 2, Satan comes into the heavenly council. Satan is able to interact in that council with the Lord. And so that's the direction that I would lean with a text like this, is that this is angels and demons alike. And the Lord has said, who will entice the king of Israel, Ahab, that he will go up and fall. So Yahweh's plan is to bring about the demise, the destruction of Ahab. And this is something you can see in 1 Kings. It's not something that is focused on by the chronicler, because he's focusing on the kings of Judah. He's focusing on the southern kingdom in particular, where God's house is and the worship of Yahweh is. So God is going to remove Ahab and Ahab's house from its authority over Israel. He's going to give it to another. So who's going to entice Ahab? Who's going to bring it about? And who's going to make it happen? And then we get this lying spirit in the mouth of his prophets. So this spirit, this angel, which could be an angel or it could be a demon, is going to go and he's going to cause the prophets of Ahab to lie and to convince Ahab to go and fight. Again, I'm pointing to the Job 1 and 2 accounts of Satan in the council of God, because this makes sense for Satan. This makes sense for a demon to do, but it does not make sense for an angel of God to lie. That the devil is the father of lies. And so we certainly see God work through evil. I mean, even the cross. Consider the cross for a moment and just how evil that moment is. That the devil thinks he's defeated God. The devil thinks he's killed God. And in a way, yes, he has. He's killed God. He didn't defeat him. He killed him. But at the same time, that very evil thing that the devil thinks is a triumph is actually the Lord's victory. And that the Lord worked through that. The Lord actually used the devil in that sense. And it's not the only time in Scripture that something like that happens. The Lord works through evil in this world to bring about good for his people. And so this is an example, an illustration of that occurring, where I would argue this is probably a demon that is taking up this task. Yahweh has declared disaster concerning you. That's Micaiah's last word to King Ahab. And then Zedekiah strikes him and basically says, which way did the Spirit go out for me? This is very similar to the arrest of Jesus, when the soldiers are mocking him and they strike him and they say, prophesy to us, O Christ, which one hit you? And this is essentially what Zedekiah is doing here. And Micaiah's response to him is that you will have your answer on the day when you're in an inner chamber hiding yourself. That would be a response of fear that the attack, the destruction of Israel is going to come upon Israel, and Zedekiah will be found hiding at that point. For arguably the chief prophet of a king to go into hiding certainly is a declaration that something great is going to occur, great in a negative sense. So that's our picture of the little conversation between Zedekiah and Micaiah. And then Ahab imprisons Micaiah, has him thrown into prison, fed with meager rations, so very little bread, very little water, until I return in peace. So he's going to go fight. He's going to go to Ramoth Gilead anyway. He's going to fight, and when he comes back, then Micaiah can be released from prison. Maybe he'll have learned his lesson. Micaiah's response is true and right. If you return in peace, Yahweh has not spoken by me. And he calls all the people to pay attention, to hear it. In fact, if the king returns in peace, then the punishment for Micaiah should be death, not release. If he has falsely prophesied in the name of Yahweh, he is to be put to death. That is the penalty for Old Testament false prophets. That's not what's on Ahab's mind, however. His 400 prophets deserved that fate, and they don't get it either. So then we have the defeat of Ahab as the final paragraph of the text today. They go up to fight at Ramoth Gilead anyway. This is a question for your family to maybe discuss and ponder. Why did Jehoshaphat go? After this man of God, Micaiah, has spoken so against the journey, why did he go? I don't have an answer for that. Just not good. The king of Israel, Ahab, says he's going to disguise himself to go into battle, while Jehoshaphat wears his robes. So Jehoshaphat is being volunteered to act as king in this battle and to wear his robes, which means the enemy army is going to fixate on him, because if you kill your enemy's king, the battle's pretty much over. While Ahab himself just goes undercover. So nobody's going to be targeting him specifically. And we then see Ben-Hadad speak that very way to his commanders, that they would not fight great or small, but they would only aim for the king. Aim for the head, cut it off, make this swift, is the battle plan. And so they see Jehoshaphat in the royal robes. They assume he's the king of Israel until he cries out. When he cries out, Yahweh helps him, opens the eyes of the enemies so that they realize he's not their target, and they turn away from Jehoshaphat. However, verse 33, a certain man drew his bow at random and struck the king of Israel. Is it really at random? It was for that man, but the Lord is working. The Lord guided that death blow in a way. I mean, again, consider the words of Micaiah to Ahab before this battle, that it was the Lord's intent that he go up and fall. So the Lord has brought this about. And so Ahab had his chariot driver take him out of the battle. The battle continues all day, and at evening, at sunset, Ahab dies. So he did not listen to the prophet. Even though he inquired, he did not listen, and he falls.